Seventh edition of the Big East Coast Bias season preview hangout. Robert O'Neill, Mike Hopkins filling in for Chris Novak tonight, and it actually works out nicely because Mike's a big Providence guy. So, Mike, welcome. I believe we figured out our difficulties. I think you're still with us here.
I am here.
All right. Let's just jump right into it. I know you were at the exhibition game on Saturday. If you just want to start with some thoughts you took away from that, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, it was nice to finally get back up to Rhode Island. Haven't been up there in quite some time, and get to see the dunk. It was nice to see. Providence has a lot of, so it was good to get a first look at them against another team instead of seeing them in practice. So I thought that overall, the score was not really a factor. It didn't, they're playing Stonehill. It doesn't really matter who wins or how much, as long as they don't lose. But I think that ultimately the game kind of went. I think Ed Cooley would say he's probably pretty happy with how it went down. I mean, he probably wasn't happy with all the things. He certainly was not happy with the defense and the fact that they were giving up a lot of open looks at the three-point line, and that was an emphasis before the game. So that's not good that they weren't on top of the scouting report. But that's the freshmen are going to do that. So I think it was a good learning experience in terms of specific players. I think the guy I was most impressed with of the freshman group was Ryan Fizikis. Let's say a swingman 3 from Michigan, Indiana. I believe he was the first recruit that committed in this class way back in October of 2013, and that was after he was at Late Night Madness that year, which was kind of everybody was a little surprised with that commit because it was kind of an off the radar guy. He wasn't a top 100 or really top 150. He was kind of a developmental player. It looks like he's developed. So I thought he looked really good on Saturday. He took a lot of threes and he missed a few, and Cooley kept yelling at him to shoot more, and he kept shooting, and that's always nice when a freshman's not timid. Sometimes they'll want to defer, especially with a guy like Chris Dunn. But Dunn kept feeding him the ball, and good team looked pretty good. He is a little bit behind the other freshmen in the sense that he had a broken thumb and missed a lot of practices over the last few weeks. But I thought he looked good. I thought Drew Edwards looked good. He's 6'3" combo guard from Calvert Hall in Baltimore. I thought he looked pretty solid. He made a couple of mental mistakes, and Cooley let him know about it. But I think he played solidly. He ran the ball. He ran transition. He got out on the break and caught a few passes from Dunn and finished at the rim. He played pretty solid defense, and he showed that he can handle the ball a little bit. So another versatile player that they'll be able to utilize, because I think it's going to be one of those seasons where you got to figure out which freshman's playing the best and kind of just keep rotating them, because aside from Chris Dunn, there's not a lot of other sure things on his team. In terms of, I think the player that everybody was talking about during and after the game was Rodney Bullock, and he's technically, I guess, a redshirt sophomore. This is his third year with the program. He got suspended his freshman year, and then he missed last season with a torn ACL. But so he's finally back. He actually played in this game 2 years ago in his true freshman season, and was kind of mediocre in 15 minutes. He scored the first 4 points on Saturday and never looked. 26 points, 26 points on like something like 10 of 14 from the floor, 11 rebounds. But he looked very, very good. I was kind of going into the season trying to temper everyone's expectations, because we saw last year with Chris Dunn how the rust does play a big factor. Dunn's first game of the season last year was terrible. So I was kind of thinking that might happen again with Bullock, but he came out firing. And he's a very versatile player, about 6'7", 6'8", always around the ball. The first basket of the game was off, I think, off and off out of somebody's hand, right spot. He showed some nice moves. He had a couple step backs. He drove from the elbow. He looks like he's going to be a good player, and this is the kind of player that Cooley actually recently was interviewed somewhere and said, there's always some player every year that comes and says, "Who the hell was that?"
Yeah.
I think that this year it's probably going to be Rodney Bullock, and they're going to need to help out the scoring because losing a lot with LaDante Henton, who's now playing professional. Bullock was a newsmaker, but I thought the freshman looked pretty good. Ricky Council didn't play a lot comparatively to the other freshmen. I think he got the same amount of minutes as Fazekas, but Fazekas' minutes were, I think, more critical. He was playing with Dunn and Bentel and the other guys who were the starters. And Quadri Smith, who's a late addition to the class, a big guy, went to IMG Academy last year I believe he's also from Maryland. I thought looked a little overmatched. Not overmatched, but just he's a freshman. He's a freshman who is still learning Providence's system. He made a couple of mental mistakes about when they're running an offensive set, and he ran to the wrong side of the lane. Bento were on the same side, and a couple of problems like that. He was a little slow off the ground. He had a couple of the Stonehill guys going over and getting tips over his back, which, I mean, if he's going to be in there, he's got to rebound. And then the other thing, everybody was saying, oh, he's such a wide body. A wide body is going to be great on the pick and roll. He got called for a moving screen. I mean, he's a freshman, so people are going to have to be patient. He's going to have to play just because there's really nobody else besides Bentel who can probably clog up the lane and play in the middle. But he's probably going to be overmatched early, and I think he'll probably be in there and rack up some fouls, and hopefully Ben Bentel is ready to play. So that was impression. The one other thing was the press. I was kind of interested to see how they were going to come out. Providence hasn't really pressed at all under Cooley because for most of the time they've had like 6 players that they could actually run out there. So I was interested to see what they were going to do. It was pretty lackluster. They were going with a straight man press, and it was half the time they forgot to get into it. Cooley was just on the sideline beside himself half the time on the press. You could tell he wanted them on. He must have probably told them in the huddle on a make, I want everybody up, and then Rodney Bullock would score, and everybody would run back, and he would look around and put his arms up like, am I the only one here who's listening to me? So that was a little bit. And after the game, he said that the press was a 3rd grade press, is what he characterized it. So he said he's hoping that they'll get a high school press by the time the non-conference rolls around, the Big East play, and then have a college press for the stretch run. He's hoping.
Yeah, and you mentioned Henton leaving, a lot of scoring to pick up. I mean, other than Chris Dunn, who's gonna be, a guy to pick up the scoring?
Yeah, I think it's going to have to probably be Ben Bentel in the secondary scoring role, unless Bullock is really as good as he looked on Saturday. It's certainly possible that Bullock could put up something in the neighborhood of a Kadeem Batts 12 and 8 or something like that. I think it's going to just have to be kind of throwing a lot of bodies at it. I think Henton averaged in the ballpark of 19, 20 points a game last year, so I think Dunn will increase. You'll see his number go up from 15. He'll probably be close to 18. Going to have Bentel probably go from like 6 to 10, 6 to 12. And then Jalen, another guy who ever looking for him to step on the stretch. He's a 3-point shooter. He's a very versatile 6'7" athlete. And I think people are kind of looking at him to step up a little bit. And I mean, it's hard to say step up and be a sophomore, but unfortunately he's one of the more experienced players on this team right now. So the scoring is probably going to have to come from Bentel, Bull, everybody else in there. I think kind of what I was alluding to earlier about the freshmen is it's probably going to be the case where you kind of figure out which one of the freshmen is playing well that night, and you ride that guy. And they're all kind of versatile, so the lineups aren't going to be, if they have to ride Drew Edwards, he's a 6'3" combo guard. Maybe Kyron Cartwright doesn't play as much. If they have to ride Fazekas, maybe a 6'7", 3'4", maybe you have Lindsay doesn't play as much. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where I think they're going to be trying to find every single night, almost, especially in the non-conference, what the right recipe is for piecing everything around Dunn. and that makes me pretty nervous for the non-conference schedule. I think there are some potential early season losses that could be big problems come March.
Yeah, and we can just jump right into the schedule. What non-conference games do you see giving the most trouble just off the bat?
Well, I think right off the bat, Harvard. I know they lost Sione Chambers, but they're a well-coached team. They have experienced guys who are there, and it's the first game of the year, so you never really know. I mean, Providence has the last few years played very tight games. They had a BC game, I think, a couple years ago, went to overtime. They had who they have Albany last year, and I think that was a game that was not quite put away with about 4 or 5 minutes left. So I could see Harvard being a problem. It's a Saturday night, and I think the place will be pretty crowded, but you never really know. And then you jump right to the next game is Illinois on a Wednesday night, and that's going to be probably Illinois is pretty depleted injury wise. They've had a lot of freak injuries. I think the point guard Kendrick Nunn has a broken thumb. They've had one of their big freshmen, Jalen Coleman. I think he's got a foot problem. There's a team from the Big Ten. So that's the first 2 games of the season right off the bat. And when you got all these freshmen, you don't really know how they're going to perform. And then you get down to the next game, and it's Brown, the Providence Killers. They've been playing Providence tight and beating 2 different Ed Cooley teams in the 4 years he's been at Providence. So I think those 3 games are kind of tough starters for them. But after that, NJIT shouldn't be a problem at all. I mean, last year they were the upset darlings. I think Evansville is probably the game. I really wouldn't be surprised if they lost that game. That's their first game of the Wooden Legacy tournament out in Anaheim. And Evansville is going to be a good team this year. They might win their league. They have a number of good players. They actually have a really good point guard who would be a nice matchup for Dunn. So after that, it opens up a little bit after that. But if they do happen to win that Evansville game and Arizona beats Santa Clara, then they'll get Arizona on the Friday after Thanksgiving, and that'll be probably the toughest game they'll play all year, obviously, I would think, unless they somehow meet someone else in the NCAA tournament. But after that, it's Hartford, and then they got the rivalry game against URI. But after that, it's BC's not good this year. Bryant's not good. They got Ryder. So I think if they can make it through the opening stretch, Harvard, Illinois, Brown, and then maybe go 2-1 out in California in that tournament, I think they'll be in pretty good shape coming into the home stretch with exam week and everything around Christmas time. And then we got Big East play on New Year's Eve, and they got Butler this year at Hinkle.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to open the season. I mean that's a good test for a team like Providence, who they might be a little more towards the middle of the Big East to face a team that I think everyone will put in the top 4 in Butler.
Yeah, I lost you a little bit there, but
yeah.
But yeah, I think the concern is just the youth is really the concern. I think that they maybe weren't expecting to be quite this young this year. They've had some surprise transfers the last couple of years. So when they were making this schedule, they probably had some other things in mind, potentially, that they might have a couple more juniors and some more experienced players. But yeah, I think that if they can make it through the non-conference losing 3 or less games, they'll be in phenomenal shape, because Big East play we've seen the last few years with this new configuration of the league, it's so razor thin between the difference between 3rd and 6th, or even 2nd and 6th. I mean, Providence had a game last year, their final game of the season, where if they won, they would finish 2nd, and if they lost and had a bunch of different things happen, they could finish 5th. So that's just the way the league is always going to be. I think in that middle of the pack, teams are always going to be really razor thin, in the 12 to 9 win range. It's going to between talent and skill is going to be kind of luck, I think, at a certain point. And if you have a dominant player like a Chris Dunn, maybe that goes in your favor once you get into some of those grinded out kind of games. And I know Cooley had talked. He talked recently at a donor event where he was saying that he thinks the team will be very good by February, March. So the question is, how are they going to get there? And if they do get there, and I was even having this discussion with somebody yesterday, even if they do falter and maybe lose 4 or 5 games and they're not in good shape for their, I mean, I'm not going to put it out of the realm of the possibility that they couldn't make a run in the Big East tournament. So that's just the way this league is. It's going to be a really exciting year, even though they're middle of the pack in theory, picked 5th by the coaches. I mean, you got the National Player of the Year candidate, and then everybody else, and you got to figure it out. But I think that they're going to probably take a little bit of time. There'll be probably a loss or 2 in the non-conference that everybody will go nuts about again, like they did for Brown last year. But I think that Cooley has shown a remarkable ability in his time to make do with what he has. So he's got a pretty good first piece in Chris Dunn, and then I think everybody else will kind of figure it out as they go along.
Yeah, and I mean, just on paper, would you call this Cooley's best recruiting class since he got to Providence?
On paper, definitely not. But I think they have a chance to be really good 4-year players. I think Ryan Fazikis is the kind of kid who's going to come in and get incrementally better. And by the time he's a senior, and I don't want to put this on him right now, but a lot of people are kind of looking at him and saying, "Oh, he kind of looks like maybe like an Austin Crozier type player, who was another Providence alum." So, that's the kind of player that he is. He's a sharpshooter. He's got good size, and he's from Indiana, which is a big basketball state. So, they have some good, and Drew Everett from Calvert Hall. I mean, Baltimore Catholic League is one of the toughest high school leagues around these days. That's not a prep league, so they have some good pedigree people. Edwards comes from a great family. His dad is a really nice guy. His twin sister is a top recruit. She actually is at Clemson. She may be starting this year as a freshman at Clemson, his twin sister. So they have some good players. But I think the best class is Chris Dunn class. With the other people that are no longer in that class. But I mean, Chris Dunn, McDonald's All-American, All-American in college. That might be the best one. On paper, the best one's probably the 2014 class, but they no longer have Pascal Chukwu. He's in Syracuse, freezing his butt off up there.
Yeah.
And then that we'll see what what Rodney Bullock keeps developing into, and Jalen Lindsey. Those are all top 100 guys. So on paper, the recruiting has been kind of a rough subject in Friartown right now. Everybody's kind of losing their mind. They're trying to find a big man because they don't have any really besides Ben Bentel. So it's kind of been making everybody a little crazy, but it's the kind of thing where they're not recruiting well until they are, and I think they're on their way. They have a lot of balls in the air. So recruiting is always interesting. I think they have a really nice class, the kids that are freshmen this year. And I think they're probably going to go down 2 or 3 of them as very, very good fan favorite type 4-year college players at Providence.
All right, yeah. And I mean, you mentioned Pascal Chukwu. Is it possible that they're going to miss him more than LaDontae Henton just based on what they have? I mean, Henton's scoring's hard to replace, but you still have Chris Dunn to get some scoring for you. You don't have much height.
Yeah, I think the hurt of Chukwu is twofold. One, immediately they just don't have any size anymore. They were a very big team last year, but the thing that really is going to hurt them was probably, I think, next year. I think his junior year is when he's going to break out, and now it's going to be his redshirt sophomore year. But he was not ready for a huge role even this season. He was going to get minutes more so than last year because of the need, but he probably, in my estimation, wasn't ready for more than 25 minutes a game. And obviously he and his people thought differently, or whatever they thought, or who knows what's going on with these kids. But people make decisions for all kinds of reasons. But yeah, I don't think this year is going to, frankly, it might help them that he's not there this year, because it lets them go right up and down with Chris Dunn and play a very fast-paced game where they would have had footer rumbling up and roll, but he's not good in the pick and pop, or there's a lot of things now that they're going to be running a lot of sets with pick and roll where they're going to have Ben Bentel, Ryan Fazekas, Jalen Lindsey, Rodney Bullock, and that's a very much more versatile pick and roll. Being able to have guys that can also pop out, slip through. There's a lot of different things that Chuku couldn't do. So, it's terrible in the sense that he was 7'2" and he was a top recruit, and they need size, but they don't really need size. Ultimately, college basketball and basketball in general is really changing a lot, and I think you see it. Everyone talks about Golden State with Draymond Green playing up front, and there's no reason that Providence can't have a similar, smaller, fast-paced team. And the other misconception about this Providence team in terms of size is that they're not small. They're just small up front. They have everybody else is big for their position. Chris Dunn, 6'3", I think he's about 220 now. He's big. Looks like he added some weight. So that's your point guard. And then you can run out all kinds of guys on the wing between 6'5" and 6'7". So, they're not small. They just are not big up front. And the big key is going to be rebounding and be able to keep guys off the offensive glass, I think, is the biggest thing. And Chuku obviously would have helped there, but I think that his big year is going to be next year.
Yeah, I agree. Getting back to your point, even if you look just in the Big East, Seton Hall has some nice big guys, and Villanova has Daniel Trefu. But other than that, it's mostly a conference of guards that, and Providence actually doesn't match up too poorly against most Big East teams if you just go off that.
Yeah, definitely. I think even Angel Delgado, sort of was able to neutralize them last year in some of the games. It's hard that the Seton Hall team last year was kind of a dumpster fire at the end when Providence got them at Seton Hall. But, Delgado's a very good player, but he's not big either. He's only about 6'8", 6'9". He's just a crazy guy around the rim. But, Chefu is really, at this point, I think the only traditional 6'11" kind of a big guy now. So you get him twice a year, and were they going to beat Villanova twice or even maybe once anyway? So I think that there's personnel this year. It's not going to be this isn't Josh Smith. There's no Stainbrook. There's not a lot of guys who are just going to be in there banging around anymore. So that'll definitely, I think, help them out in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. Just real quick, where do you see them finishing in terms of the Big East?
Well, I haven't sat down and done a game-by-game prediction yet. I wanted to see them play first, and then I'm probably going to do that this week. Quick plug for the site. I'm going to be doing my season preview of Big East Coast Bias probably this week, so keep an eye out for that. But I think they're probably going to be in that 10-win range again, and anywhere between third and sixth, depending on how everything else plays out. So my guess is probably I think they were 11-7 last year. I think they'll probably be about 10-8 this year. It's just my guess.
So would you say on the bubble in terms of the tournament?
Yeah, I think definitely firmly on the bubble. I don't think it's going to be like last year where they're playing for seeding at the end. I think they're going to be right in the thick of things. But I think I even said last year I thought they were going to be maybe win 20, 21 games and be just outside the tournament. I a little down on them last year, and they ended up being better. More down on them this year, so maybe they'll be better again. But I think probably looking somewhere in the 19-win range, and that's probably not going to be good enough unless they do some more work in the Big East tournament.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you mentioned Chris Dunn picking up the scoring. Do you see his rebounding going up at all, or he's got just as good a chance to get rebounds as anyone else on the court for them, right?
Yeah, and he does rebound really well for a guard. I think he was somewhere in the range of 5.5 rebounds last year, and that'll probably tick up a little because they're going to have to kind of gang rebound. I know they want to run, but they're probably at certain points going to have to adjust and keep their guards in to help rebound because second chance points are just killers. And especially now, even it was kind of a stark thing it's like the first game I've seen live where they've had a 30-second shot clock, and you start to realize that you're going to get so many more possessions. So you have to make sure that you're trying to limit the other team as much as possible. And so rebounding is going to be the big key. So I think Chris Dunn will probably see his numbers go up there. I think what you'll see is, I think last year he was something like 15, 7, almost 8 assists, almost 6 rebounds. He'll probably be somewhere in the range of like 18, 19 points, 5 or 6 assists, and then maybe 6 rebounds, 7 rebounds. And he'll still probably get his steals because he's ridiculous with his wingspan. But I do think Dunn will rebound. I think Jalen Lindsay needs to improve his rebounding. I think his rebounding numbers were pretty abysmal last year, so I think he's got to mix it up, especially because he's probably not going to be playing the shooting guard. Be more on the wing. They have to help out. And his rebounds on Saturday, I thought he was more aggressive going back to the rim. So yeah, I think Dunn will probably have to do more. I think everybody else is going to have to pitch in because there's no Tyler Harris, there's no DeRochers, there's no Henton. They lost a lot of guys who were willing to go down there, who were big, long guys and grab rebounds. So the guards are going to have to help definitely.
Yeah. Let's see. What else should we cover here? Yeah, you mentioned 2016, how they're already in on a lot of big men. Which one do you think they end up with?
I wouldn't be surprised if the one they end up with is somebody we don't know about right now. I think that's the way it's kind of gone for them. They have Malik White, the point guard from Richmond, in the fold so far. He's the only one they're probably going to have committed by the time the signing day comes in about, I think it's 9 or 10 days from now. And the best big guy they're involved with is probably C.D. Keita, but I think he's probably going to end up at South Carolina. That's just my guess, somewhat educated guess. But that decision could come anytime. But it depends who you listen to on that. But yeah, I think he's probably gone elsewhere. So then you start going down the list, and they have a lot of names that they're involved with right now. But 2 guys, Levi Cook, who is a big guy who was at Huntington Prep. He's actually a West Virginia native. He's now prepping at Elevate Sports Institute down in Florida. He wants to decide in the spring. You got Isaiah Whaley, who's now at Evelyn Mack Academy. He wants to decide in the spring, according to what his coach apparently said. So those guys you're going to have to wait for. And then you got other guys who they're more peripherally involved with, like Gorjak Gak, who they were down to see in early October but haven't offered yet. So it's hard to really get a feel for how serious they are there. And then they got another who's down. They offered, but he hasn't been able to set it in, been able to get a visit date yet. And then they got another guy, Darius Hicks. Your head starts spinning with all these names, but I don't know that any of those guys are really going to end up in Providence. Darius Hicks is probably, after Keita, the next most talented guy. He's certainly probably rated the next highest. But he's from Mississippi. He's got a lot of other teams that have been involved with a lot longer. Providence is just now getting involved. Jeff Battle is leading that recruitment, but I don't know. You don't know. It's hard to get a read with any of these guys. Like with some of the other recruits in years past, you could kind of really get a feel for it. You talk to people, you kind of read the tea leaves. I don't know that any of these guys are going to be the guy they end up with, and it sounds like they're not going to end up with anybody until probably the spring. So, you never know. A lot of things happen. Coaches get fired, kids decommit. So there's some names that may be really good names that might pop up, or it could just be you start scraping the barrel again. But I think the transfer meeting is always something to keep an eye on. A more experienced guy to help out up front, so Ben Benzel can go back to playing more of the 4 for his last couple of years. But yeah, I think 16 class right now is not been in good shape. Ultimately, they've lost a lot of guys they wanted, but I think Malik White is a very good player, and to have him locked down, especially since Chris Dunn will be gone after this year, so they need to keep bolstering the guard position. So I think that's a nice pickup. But the big man thing is going to be probably something we have to wait and see until April, May.
Yeah, of course. All right. We can go to some of our Twitter questions from earlier today. We kind of touched on this, but how do the Friars plan on playing with no player taller than 6'8"?
Well, you're going to see a lot of ball movement movement, a lot of Chris. It's try to go up tempo, but I mean, every coach kind of says that they want to go. Everybody wants to run. Everyone wants to do this and that. But I think ultimately they're going to play faster. Probably not be like a Bill Self Kansas team or a Roy Williams. It's not going to be that kind of fast pace. I don't think. Um, until they can figure out what these freshmen are and how they can kind of meld them into the lineup, I think you're going to see a little more of the Chris Dunn show early on, and it's just going to have to be hoping that he's able to score through double teams. But I think if you start to see some of these guys, what they really want to do probably is play a motion offense where they're swinging the ball around, and then have guys like Ryan Fazikis be open on the wing. So that's going to be how they're going to play with no size up front. Is they're going to hope that Chris Dunn can create for people, hope that the guys make shots, and then see if they can get Rodney Bullock and Bentel to kind of do their thing down low and create mismatches, because they're going to probably have mismatches on the other end. So they need to take advantage of it when they're on offense. They're going to be able to take bigger guys off the dribble. They're going to be able to pull bigger guys away, and that leaves the lane more open for Dunn. So they're going to have to try to kind of get creative. But I think Cooley certainly has shown that he's willing to switch up and change his style of play. You got the new guy in here like Jeff Battle, who's got a lot of experience with top point guards and how to run an offense through them. So I think Chris Dunn's gonna have the ball in his hands. There's no more 5-second closely guarded rule. So it's gonna be Chris Dunn and whoever can get hot that night, I think, is what they're gonna do.
All right. Yeah. Got another question. What strengths do Drew Edwards and Ricky Council bring to the roster?
Well, a little bit. I think the first thing is depth. Something that guard depth has been kind of an issue the last couple of years. Ricky Council, his most marketable skill right now is his shooting. He's got to tighten up a lot of other things in his game, but he can shoot the ball, no doubt. So if they can get him on the floor for spurts and have him maybe playing somewhere in the 8 to 12 minute range, depending on how quickly he picks up on some of the things he needs to pick up on, like defensive rotations and other things, I think he can add value because is the best shooter. I think Council has the best stroke. So and Drew Edwards' value is in his versatility. I mean, he can play with the ball in his hands. He can play off the ball. He can guard multiple positions. And he's just a really heady player, really nice basketball IQ, and he kind of just gets it. He's just one of those kids that just looks like he's really assertive. It's rare to see in a freshman, somebody who he looks pretty confident out there. He also has a bit of an Odell Beckham vibe going on with his hair right now.
All right, we got another one here. Are the new uniforms a permanent thing, or is that just for Saturday?
As far as I know, those are going to be their uniforms. They usually have a few. I think they usually have about 3 uniforms. They have their home, their road, and then an alternate. But yeah, I think I liked the new uniforms. I think the lettering looks much nicer than the ones they were using last year. I believe the font, somebody was saying the font is called Providence. It was created for them. So nice to see that they're finally using it. But yeah, I think those are going to be their home whites probably. I think the blacks will be similar. They actually have new practice gear too. Everything looks good now. They've really upgraded the uniforms in the last few years. They have renewed their deal with Nike. So I'm sure with that new deal, there was probably a lot of little bells and whistles, little things here and there. They're going to look nice probably compared to some of the other uniforms they were running out there maybe during days.
All right. I know you've got a little bit of a bias, obviously, but would you say Chris Dunn is the favorite for National Player of the Year?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yep. Are we still there?
That's part. I'm not getting it. Were you saying Chris Dunn favorite for Player of the Year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think really the next competition is going to be Devonta Smith-Rivera, who was the preseason pick last year. He's going to probably be the only competition. I mean, someone could come out of the woodwork. You never really know in the Big East. But yeah, I think Dunn, if he stays healthy, I really don't see him not winning it in a runaway kind of fashion.
Yeah. What about National Player of the Year? Would you call him a favorite there too?
No, I don't think so. It's nice that he's getting some pub in the preseason. He's a lot of nice articles being written about him. Blue Ribbon did name him of the year. A lot of other. I mean, I know Rob Dowster at College Basketball Talk loves him. I just think it's going to be difficult to overcome the name recognition factor, the fact that Providence is not probably going to be, as we were saying before. I think they're going to be on the bubble, and I think there was some stats. Someone said that the National Player of the Year has never been from a team that didn't make the NCAA tournament. So I think if Providence is going to be on the bubble and they're not going to get in, I just can't see how it'll happen. I think he'll be a first-team All-American, certainly. I think that should be fairly consensus. But he'd have to have a really monster year, and Providence would have to surprise people, I think, to probably for him to actually be the Player of the Year nationally.
All right. Yeah. I think that'll about do it here, unless there's anything else you want to touch on while we're here. I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, I think that was a good be here before we know it. And the only other thing, maybe just to mention, I don't know if people are aware that they do have one of those little fun little secret scrimmages on Saturday. They're playing Northeastern, so I'm sure that someone will whisper something to somebody, and Jeff Goodman will tweet it. So I'm sure we'll hear about it. But Northeastern is on Saturday, and that'll be a nice test for them. I think they're pretty experienced team, that Northeastern team. So that's probably the only other thing. And looking forward to getting back up to the dunk for opening night against Harvard.
Yeah, and your season preview will be up sometime this week, you said?
Yeah, I'm working on it now.
All right. That'll about do it here. Big thanks to Mike Hopkins for joining us. You follow Mike on Twitter. I don't want to screw it up, at PCBB1917. And,
Yep, and just for people that don't know, the 1917 is the year that Providence, the school, was founded. That's what the significance of that.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks, Rob.
We will be back Wednesday talking about Georgetown. That one should probably be in the afternoon again. I believe we'll have Chris back joining me. So till then, Robert O'Neill for Mike Hopkins. Thanks for watching the Big East Coast Bias Providence Hangout, and we'll see you guys Wednesday.